What if the most unexpected friendship changed lives forever? A friendship so rare, so powerful, that it touched the hearts of everyone who witnessed it? This is the story of a bond that defied all odds, between a child and a creature known for its strength, yet capable of the deepest love. It all began with a single moment, one quiet, almost unnoticeable interaction that would change everything. At first, no one could have imagined what was about to happen. A young child, full of wonder, drawn to the towering presence of a gorilla, a creature both feared and admired. Their eyes met, two souls from completely different worlds, separated by glass, yet connected by something invisible. The child's small fingers pressed against the cold surface, mirroring the massive hand on the other side. The gorilla didn't move at first, only watched, its deep brown eyes filled with something few had ever seen before. Recognition, curiosity, something almost human. What started as a moment of fascination turned into something more, a silent conversation, an understanding, as if the child and the gorilla could see into each other's hearts. No words were spoken, yet something unspoken passed between them, a feeling of trust, a sense that they were meant to find each other. Day after day, the child returned, and the gorilla was always there, waiting. It was a bond no one expected, one that would soon face challenges greater than either of them could have imagined. Because in a world that doesn't always understand connections like these, their friendship would soon be put to the ultimate test. In a quiet corner of the world, surrounded by towering trees and the distant sounds of nature, stood a wildlife sanctuary, a place where animals rescued from captivity or danger found safety. Among them was a gorilla, a magnificent silverback named Congo. He was massive, powerful, yet behind his strong exterior was a story of loss. Rescued at a young age, Congo had spent most of his life in the sanctuary, watching the world from behind the thick glass of his enclosure. He had seen countless visitors come and go, their faces blurring together, but none had ever looked at him quite the way she did. She was a child, no more than 6 years old, with bright, curious eyes and an unshakable sense of wonder. Her name was Lily. While other children rushed past the gorilla exhibit, pointing and laughing, Lily stood still, watching. She didn't see a beast. She didn't see something to be feared or stared at. She saw something else, someone else. Maybe it was the way his deep brown eyes held a kind of sadness, or the way he sat, quiet and thoughtful, as if waiting for something. Whatever it was, Lily felt drawn to him, and he noticed her too. The first time their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. Congo, who rarely reacted to visitors, tilted his head ever so slightly. It was small, almost imperceptible, but to Lily, it was everything. She took a step closer, pressing her tiny hands against the glass, and to her surprise, the gorilla slowly lifted his own massive hand, mirroring her. The world around them faded, the noise of the sanctuary becoming nothing more than a distant hum. It was as if, for that moment, they were the only two beings in existence, and from that moment on, neither of them would ever be the same. Lily's visits became a daily ritual. Every morning, she would tug at her father's hand, eager to return to the sanctuary, eager to see Congo, and every day he was there, waiting. Their interactions were simple yet profound. She would sit by the glass, talking softly as if he could understand, and in a way, he did. He watched her intently, his deep eyes following her every movement. Sometimes he would mimic her gestures, tilting his head when she did, lifting his arm when she waved. Other times he would simply sit, listening, as if her presence alone was enough. The zookeepers noticed. So did the visitors. People began gathering around, watching this strange, beautiful connection unfold. But while some marveled, others questioned. Was it safe? Could a child truly form a bond with an animal so powerful, so unpredictable? Doubts grew. And soon, whispers of concern turned into something more, something that would threaten to separate them forever. It started like any other day. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the sanctuary as Lily rushed through the gates, her small feet barely touching the ground. She knew exactly where she was going, the same place she went every day, to Congo. Her heart raced with excitement as she approached the glass enclosure, expecting to see him there, waiting, as he always did. But today was different. Today, Congo wasn't in his usual spot. He wasn't watching the visitors or sitting by the glass. He was further back, sitting in the shadows, his massive frame still, his eyes distant. Something was wrong. Lily pressed her hands against the glass. "Congo?" she whispered, her voice filled with quiet concern. He didn't move. He didn't lift his hand to mirror hers like he always did. Instead, he let out a deep breath, almost like a sigh, and turned his head away. It was as if something had changed overnight, as if the bond they had built so carefully had suddenly begun to crack. Lily felt a tightness in her chest. She didn't understand. Had she done something wrong? Was Congo upset with her? Or was something else happening? A voice behind her made her turn. One of the zookeepers, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, was watching her with hesitation. "He's not himself today," she said softly. "We think he senses something." Lily's brows furrowed. "Senses what?" she asked. Sarah sighed, glancing at the other staff nearby. "There's been talk about relocating him, Lily. Some believe it's time for him to be moved to a larger facility, maybe even to another sanctuary. Nothing's decided yet, but—" Her voice trailed off as she watched Lily's expression shift from confusion to something else. Fear. Lily spun back toward Congo. The gorilla, as if sensing the conversation, finally turned his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers. There was something different in them now, an emotion she had never seen before. Worry, maybe even sadness. He knew. He knew that something was happening, something beyond his control. And in that moment, Lily knew too. If she didn't do something, if she didn't find a way to stop it, she might lose her best friend forever. The sanctuary buzzed with quiet discussions. Visitors walked past, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. But for Lily, the world had narrowed to one singular thought. She had to fight for Congo, no matter what it took. She pressed her palm against the glass once more, her fingers trembling. This time, after a long, heavy pause, Congo slowly lifted his hand, pressing it against the glass on the other side. Their fingers, so small and fragile on one side, so large and powerful on the other, met in that silent space between them. No words were spoken, none were needed. They understood each other, and Lily made a promise right then and there. She would not let him go. The days that followed were different. Lily's visits to the sanctuary were no longer filled with laughter and excitement. Instead, she sat quietly by the glass, watching Congo, her mind racing with thoughts of what might happen. She had overheard more conversations between the zookeepers, and the words echoed in her mind. Relocation, transfer, change. She didn't understand why. Congo was happy here. He had a home. He had her. Why did they want to take him away? Congo seemed to feel it too. He was no longer his playful, curious self. He spent more time sitting near the back of his enclosure, less interested in the people passing by. But whenever Lily appeared, his deep eyes would soften, and for those moments, he seemed like the Congo she had always known. It was as if he was waiting, just like she was, unsure of what was coming next. One afternoon, as Lily sat with her back against the glass, arms wrapped around her knees, she felt a shadow move behind her. She turned to see Sarah, the kind zookeeper, kneeling beside her. "You really love him, don't you?" Sarah asked gently. Lily nodded without hesitation. "He's my best friend." Sarah sighed, glancing toward Congo, who sat watching them. "The decision isn't final yet," she admitted. but the directors think it might be better for him to be somewhere bigger, somewhere with more space, maybe even with other gorillas. Lily frowned. But what if he doesn't want to go? What if he's happy here? Sarah hesitated, then gave a small smile. That's the part they don't always think about. But sometimes, when people care enough, they can change things. Lily's heart pounded. Could she change things? Could she stop them from taking Congo away? She didn't know how, but she knew she had to try. That night, she stayed up late, sitting on the floor of her bedroom, scribbling words onto a piece of paper. She wrote everything she could think of, how much Congo meant to her, how he wasn't just an animal in an enclosure, but a friend. When she was done, she folded the paper and placed it carefully in her backpack. The next morning, she arrived at the sanctuary earlier than usual, clutching the letter tightly in her hands. Sarah was there, waiting, and Lily looked up at her with determination in her eyes. "Can you give this to them? To the people who decide?" she asked. Sarah took the letter, unfolding it and reading silently. When she looked back at Lily, there was something in her expression. Hope. But Lily knew a letter might not be enough. So when the weekend came, she stood outside the sanctuary entrance with a handmade sign, its bold letters written in her own shaky handwriting, "Let Congo stay." People stopped to read it. Some asked questions. Some even nodded in agreement. Little by little, a crowd began to form. And as more people started to care, as whispers turned into voices, Lily began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could save her friend. The crowd outside the sanctuary grew larger with each passing day. What had started as one small girl holding a handmade sign had become something much bigger. Parents, children, and even reporters gathered, all asking the same question: why move Congo when he was already home? Lily stood among them, her heart racing as people around her signed petitions and held up their own signs in support. But deep down, she knew none of it would matter unless the sanctuary's directors listened, and there was no guarantee they would. Inside the sanctuary, Congo watched from his enclosure, his dark eyes following the growing movement beyond the glass. He didn't understand the words people were saying, but he could feel the energy, the change in the air. And when Lily arrived that afternoon, pressing her hand against the glass as she always did, Congo responded without hesitation. His massive hand lifted, meeting hers through the invisible barrier. It was their silent promise. No matter what happened, they were in this together. But not everyone saw their bond the same way. Behind closed doors, the sanctuary directors debated. "She's just a child," one of them argued. "We can't let emotions decide what's best for the animal." Another shook his head. "But have you seen how he responds to her? That kind of connection is rare. Maybe we need to reconsider." The discussion stretched on for days, and the uncertainty weighed on Lily like a heavy stone in her chest. She had done everything she could. Now, all she could do was wait. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Sarah found Lily sitting outside the sanctuary gates, her sign resting beside her. She knelt down and placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "You should go home and rest, sweetheart," she said softly. But Lily shook her head. "What if they decide while I'm gone?" Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with quiet fear. Sarah hesitated, then sighed. "Come with me," she said, taking Lily's hand and leading her inside. The sanctuary was quiet, almost eerily so. The usual hum of visitors had faded with the closing hours, and only the rustling of leaves filled the air. Sarah guided Lily toward Congo's enclosure, where a few of the directors stood in front of the glass, watching the gorilla in thoughtful silence. One of them, an older man with silver hair, turned to Lily. "You must be the little girl everyone's been talking about," he said, his voice kind but measured. Lily swallowed hard and nodded. The man crouched down to her level. "Tell me, why do you think Congo should stay?" Lily took a deep breath, clutching the edges of her coat. Because he's happy here, she said simply. Because he's not just an animal to me, he's my friend. A long silence followed. Then, the man glanced back at Congo, who was watching the exchange with quiet intensity. After what felt like forever, he sighed and stood. "We'll talk," he said. "We'll think about it." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And for the first time in days, hope flickered in Lily's heart. As she turned back to Congo, he let out a deep, gentle breath, his eyes soft and knowing. They weren't giving up yet. Not now. Not ever. The next few days felt like an eternity. Lily continued her visits, but each time she sat by Congo's enclosure, uncertainty loomed over them like a heavy cloud. She watched the zookeepers move about, their expressions unreadable. The sanctuary directors met behind closed doors, discussing things she couldn't hear. No one gave her answers. No one told her if her fight had been enough, but she refused to give up hope. One afternoon, as Lily pressed her palm against the glass like she always did, Congo hesitated for the first time. He looked at her, his dark eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. Then, slowly, he backed away. Lily's heart pounded. "Congo?" she whispered. He didn't turn away from her, but he didn't come back either. Instead, he sat near the far end of his enclosure, watching her from a distance. It was as if he knew something she didn't, as if he was preparing for what might come next. Then, the announcement came. The sanctuary was holding a press conference to address Congo's future. Lily's parents took her hand as they stood among the crowd gathered in front of the main building. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and then the director stepped forward. The crowd hushed as he unfolded a small piece of paper and cleared his throat. "After careful consideration," he began, his voice steady but serious, "we have made a decision regarding Congo's relocation." Lily held her breath. The world around her blurred, every sound fading except for the director's voice. "We recognize that Congo's well-being is our highest priority, and we have taken into account not only his physical needs, but also his emotional connections. After reviewing the evidence, speaking with experts, and seeing firsthand the impact of his bond with this young girl, we have decided that Congo will remain here, in the home he knows." The words didn't register at first. Lily blinked, her mind racing to process what she had just heard. Then, the realization hit her like a wave. He was staying. Congo was staying. Her breath left her in a gasp, and before she knew it, she was running. Past the crowd, past the cameras, straight toward his enclosure. He was there, waiting, just like he always had. She pressed her hands against the glass, eyes brimming with tears, and this time, Congo didn't hesitate. He lifted his massive hand, pressing it gently against hers, sealing their bond in a moment neither of them would ever forget. The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah wiped away a tear. The sanctuary staff exchanged glances of quiet understanding. They had witnessed something rare, something undeniable. This wasn't just a girl and an animal. This was family. That day, Lily learned that love, real, honest love, had the power to change the world. And as Congo sat on the other side of the glass, watching her with soft, knowing eyes, she knew he had learned it too. The days that followed felt like a dream. The sanctuary was no longer just a place Lily visited. It was home, a place where she and Congo could continue their story without fear of separation. Word of their bond spread beyond the sanctuary gates. News stations covered their story. Newspapers printed headlines about the little girl who fought to keep her best friend. And people from all over sent letters and messages of support. Some even visited just to see them together, to witness the unspoken connection between a child and a gorilla that had changed so many hearts. But for Lily, none of that mattered as much as the simple moments. The way Congo would press his hand to the glass whenever she arrived. The way he watched her with quiet understanding, as if he knew every thought in her little mind. She talked to him just as she always had, telling him about her day, about the people who came to see him, about how much she loved him, and though Congo could not speak, he didn't have to. His eyes, his movements, the way he stayed close whenever she was near, they all spoke louder than words ever could. One afternoon, as Lily sat cross-legged on the ground near his enclosure, Sarah walked up beside her, smiling. "You did it, you know," she said softly. Lily glanced up at her, tilting her head in question. "You saved him," Sarah continued. "Because of you, he gets to stay in the only home he's ever known." Lily looked back at Congo, who was watching them with deep, gentle eyes. A small smile spread across her face. "I didn't save him," she said quietly. "He saved me too." Time moved forward, but some things never changed. Every morning, Congo waited for Lily. Every afternoon she sat with him, talking as if nothing in the world could ever come between them again. And in a way, nothing ever would. Their story had become something greater than either of them. Proof that friendship knows no boundaries, that love exists in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the smallest voices can make the biggest difference. As the sun set over the sanctuary, painting the sky in warm hues of gold and pink, Lily stood by the glass one last time for the day. She placed her palm against it, smiling as Congo did the same. No words were needed. They had all the time in the world now, and in that quiet, perfect moment, one truth remained. This was more than just a friendship. This was forever.